Hello. I'm so glad to have this chance to talk about opportunities for academic communities to reduce flying while preserving their effectiveness. As part of this symposium on initiatives neuroscientists can take to tackle the climate crisis. There's several moving parts relevant to understanding how the field of research on human brain mapping and neuroscience can change in light of the climate crisis. As part of this session, we'll enjoy hearing from Dr. Epp on how aviation emissions for conferences such as this one on human brain mapping can be reduced. We'll hear from Dr. Medawar on the climate impact of the food system and also food aspects of academic conferencing. And we'll hear from Dr. Hoffman on another emission sector addressing the climate impact of our research computational infrastructure. My talk connects these conversations in a single sector to the broader transformation initiative in university and research communities nationally and internationally. By research profession, I am, and I say this with a little trepidation because I'm worried you're going to think, why did we invite him to our conference? But I am an agricultural economist. I'm not even a brain scientist, so I feel especially privileged to be included in a spirit of interdisciplinary collaboration on climate action. I'm here to tell you about the Flying Less initiative, which I'm a co-organizer along with Joe Nevins of Vassar College. And our website has a number of features, including a blog and also a petition. The petition encourages people who support it not necessarily to stop flying themselves, but to support a strategic vision of institutional change. The planks of the petition platform include asking universities and institutions of higher education to include all of their university-related flying in their environmental impact measurement, to support virtual conferencing, to set ambitious goals for emissions reduction, and to use their influence with professional associations and funders to reduce the need for flying and to promote alternatives to flying. Along with that aspect of the petition targeting universities and university and research institutions, there's also an aspect focused on academic and professional associations, research funders, and more of an individual change aspect about what is going to be your change in your own professional practice. But you can see that the individual aspect is optional. You can choose as a petition signer which of these you want to support, and you don't have to support all of them. And the individual aspect is just one piece of the puzzle in a vision that's actually more strategic. The resources tab on this website describes other organizations doing wonderful work, such as the Youthful Explain initiative, which it describes how universities can be transformed. The Stay Grounded initiative, which has a special focus on climate justice and aviation. The Tyndall Center for Climate Research, which over the years has had from time to time a big focus on aviation and currently has a new document and set of support materials on aviation and university and research communities. And the newer Flying Less initiative in Germany, which shares a name with my own initiative, and describes how universities in Europe can change in response to the climate crisis. We also have a frequently asked questions tab. For example, it's got information. There's a good deal of misunderstanding of the greenhouse gas consequences of different modes of transportation. The wonderful Barry Saxifrage graphic, he was willing to modify it in response to some of the conversation with our initiative recently, and it sort of describes, as you look horizontally and move to the right, how many kilometers or how many miles do you get per unit of greenhouse gas emissions? So further to the right is all the great electric forms of transportation, and further to the left, and especially the lower left, is the fossil fuel transportation, and you can see aviation is in the lower left-hand corner. Let's zoom in a little on that lower left-hand corner. Part of the misinformation about this is sometimes you'll see comparisons that I find a little bit misleading between automobiles with one person and flying. It is true that if you use a traditional fossil fuels automobile, such as an SUV, and you only have one person in it, that the miles per gallon or miles per unit of fuel isn't really all that much better than flying. But I think that's a little besides the point. It's like, congratulations, you found the one mode of transportation that's as bad as flying. In fact, when you think about it in the big picture, the use of any automobile, if you're carrying more than one person in it, is a much better way of getting from place to place. And in the big picture, if you look at buses among fossil fuel transportation, and then among all the electric options, and you're getting many, many more kilometers per unit of greenhouse gas emitted. But perhaps for many of us, the issue is not really technical. It's not really that we don't know about the greenhouse gas emissions from different forms of transportation. It's that we have some skepticism about whether we could really incorporate this into a thriving research community. I recently contributed to an article in Lancet Planetary Health with colleagues at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. They organized every year for a number of years a major conference internationally on agriculture, nutrition, and health that was held particularly in low and lower middle income countries, especially with an eye towards making sure that it was accessible to scholars outside of the United States and Western Europe. And the conference, like many conferences, had to shift to an online mode due to the pandemic in 2020. And so you can see that we tracked the aviation emissions from the different years of participation in the conference. And of course, the aviation emissions plummeted to zero for the year that the conference was moved online. But the thing on all of your minds, I'm quite sure, is that sure, the aviation emissions can plummet, but what is the trade-off? What is the loss in terms of access and participation? But the number of participants during the online year actually increased, and in particular, it increased for participants in low and lower middle income countries. And so let's reflect on this. If we were expecting to be measuring what is the trade-off, what is the loss from the greener option that might have lower participation, but quite the contrary, we found that participation and environmental merit pulled in the same direction. Now, you might quite reasonably be saying to yourself, yeah, okay, that's fine for number of participants, but what about the quality of participation? Can we really build the human connection that we need as part of a research community if we don't have access to the ability to meet over coffee or the ability to meet at a wine reception that we so particularly enjoy at the academic conference? The issue may not be about numbers of participants, but loss of personal connection. It really is true, for example, that in online communication, we lose the delight and sense of place that comes from the location that we're traveling to. But the in-person conferencing also does leave people out for reasons having to do with economics and gender roles and parenting. And there's a number of reasons why the in-person conferencing that we enjoyed was not really a form of environmental justice for all participants in our research system. But also, I wonder if with a little imagination, we can perhaps do better in online communication in communicating the personality and sense of place in the location that we're broadcasting from, and thereby learn a little more about what's going on in each other's lives and the settings that we're coming from. In academic presentation, we may be in the most wonderful cities, but our in-person presentations tend to be in homogeneous conference center rooms with the same podiums and the same PowerPoint projectors. Here, in this video, at least you can see I'm in my office and I'm doing a little to communicate a sense of place with the poster of Boston transportation over my shoulder. But that's just a start. As long as the OHBM is having this presentation in video format, let's see if we can convert a limitation of online communication into a strength by grabbing my GoPro camera here and sharing something more personal about the neighborhood surrounding my office. My office on Tufts University's Boston campus is in the Chinatown neighborhood of Boston. Here on Washington Avenue is my favorite place to see Broadway musicals. Behind me here is the Old South Meeting House, where 18th century patriots planned the American Revolution and independence from the United Kingdom on democratic and republican principles. The hotel behind me here is the Omni Parker House. In 1912, Ho Chi Minh was a baker here, decades before he became leader of the National Liberation Movement in Vietnam. And Malcolm Little worked here in the 1940s as a busboy, many years before he became Malcolm X. As I walk across the Boston Common back to my office, the gold-domed building behind me is the Massachusetts State Capitol. You can see that in this video presentation, you already have more of a sense of the context that the speaker comes from than you would have if I were standing in front of a podium. This little short video, which illustrates some of the potential, is just one example of a broader set of capabilities that I think we could exploit more than we do. On our website for the Flying Less Initiative, there's also a gently satirical video series, a sort of a mock travel and tourism show called Lifestyles of the Not Jet Set. Here's an example of a clip.
Welcome to Lifestyles of the Not Jet Set, the travel and tourism show that's conducting a very personal experiment to see whether an academic career necessarily tanks the moment the person involved decides to stop flying. I'm here today in Austin, Texas. You could probably tell by the iconic statue of the cowboy by Constance Warren. Sometimes I feel like a time traveler who simultaneously, by traveling more slowly, has the power to look backwards in time with a stronger vision of what life was like for people there, and time travel forward in time to a period maybe a couple decades from now, maybe sooner, I hope, when our society has taken account of the climate crisis that we face and made adjustments to our transportation system that are appropriate. In which case, there will be much more people doing this strange thing that I'm currently doing in traveling by train to professional conferences.
I don't want to exaggerate. It's not like zero flying is the appropriate amount for academic and research communities. The question is about the overall quantity. Sometimes people respond to our Flying Less initiative by feeling the sense of loss of the flights that they find most valuable. But of course, those are not the ones that are going to be reduced first. Ask yourself about what is the possibility of reducing the flights that had less value, both for our academic careers and for our personal and global connections. For example, the long trips that we take away from family for 10-minute presentations of secondary career value, when we might have even better spent our time at home writing and accomplishing more value in our work. I'm so glad that the Organization for Human Brain Mapping and that the field of neuroscience is taking up this conversation. There's a long list of objections that people make, for example, that flying is essential for cross-cultural contact, or that flying is essential even for a sense of revolutionary spirit and social change. There's a little bit of truth to each of these points, but I think even in the walk through the neighborhood here in Boston surrounding my office, you get a sense of how connected a person can feel, both to cross-cultural contact and to a sense of revolutionary change in history. During the time of crisis, during one of these key points of decision for our society, these are the big issues that are on our mind. I hope that you enjoy your conference this week and have wonderful conversations with each other. If you feel inspired and connected to the message of this video, I hope you will sign up for the petition and share it with your colleagues. You can find it on our website at flyingless.org.